They must be laughing. At Boeing, you see my friends, hello there. Today we're going to talk about Airbus, who have been the victims of a regression bug. And an AD, not just any AD, but an urgent AD, you see, it's like a pilot friend said, they're going to win the Nobel Prize for grounding. So what's going on? Let me tell you. The month of October, at the end of October, there was a JetBlue plane coming up from Cancun and heading to Newark. And what happened is that suddenly, while it was at flight level 350, cruising altitude, the weather was good, no turbulence or anything. People weren't wearing seatbelts, which, my friends, is a very bad idea. Well, when I'm on a plane, I always have my seatbelt fastened because of the stories I'm going to tell you today. So what happens is that suddenly, abruptly, without any warning signs, the plane takes a sudden dive. What happens then? People who aren't buckled up are going to be thrown around. And also the duty-free carts, trays, and everything else lying around. It's scattered everywhere and hurts people. So you can imagine the chaos. You can imagine the worry, all of that. The plane lands in Florida, so it shortens its flight a little bit. About 15 people end up in the hospital. Nothing too serious, but still. The investigation determined, the report hasn't come out yet, but what happens is that while they're investigating, if during their work they find a serious problem that could threaten air safety, they won't wait to finish everything. As soon as they find it, they'll pick up the phone and start calling, and that's what happened. There they discovered a bug in the command chain of the Airbus A320 in the computer called elevator and aileron computer. And then this one went out of control. It went out of control and caused a very bad nosedive while the plane was on autopilot. And there you have it, here we are. So what happened is that the aeronautical authorities issued what is called an AD. So it's an airworthiness directive. It means an order for a change that must be applied to the aircraft so that it maintains its airworthiness, in other words, so that it can keep flying. So an AD, even though it's quite common, there are all kinds of levels. An AD is still serious, and especially an urgent AD like this one. So actually, it's a very drastic AD. It simply says you are not allowed to fly starting Sunday. If you don't implement a fix, that's it. There's a software fix, and if you don't implement it, you can't fly anymore. So this is something that will disrupt air travel in the coming days. So if you have to travel tomorrow, buy a ticket with an airline that operates a 737. I think that would be more advisable. So let's talk a little bit about this bug. So what the story goes like this. If you look at an Airbus, you have fly-by-wire controls. So the fly-by-wire controls. Well, we're not going to go into the history, but simply put, it's something. If we look at civil aviation, even the Concorde had fly-by-wire controls, except that on the Concorde. Well, they just had a small computer that received the commands and transferred them as they were. Well, between us, there must have been a low-pass filter or something like that. Those who have worked with that can confirm it for us in the comments. And they transferred the controls, the flight surfaces. In the Airbus, the ancestor, if you will, is what we call the spoiler elevator computer, SEC. But in the Airbus, they introduced another computer on top of that, an intelligent computer. Don't worry, there's no connection inside. But it's what we call the elevator and aileron computer. So the story goes like this. Inside an Airbus, we have the elevator and aileron computer. All right, this is the elevator and aileron computer. It's a computer built by Thales, meaning Thales makes its hardware. Even though Thales doesn't make the software that goes inside, it's Airbus that makes the software that will be put inside. So we have elevator and aileron computer, and then we have another series of computers called spoiler elevator computer, SEC. We also have the famous flight augmentation computer, but the flight augmentation computer, if you want, we're really at the heart of the command chain, whereas with the flight augmentation computer, as its name suggests, it's just there to improve the flight characteristics of the Airbus. For example, to do what's called yaw damping, to dampen what's called Dutch roll in its victim. All airliners. So that is to say, airliners tend to, if you look at the nose and you look at the wings. Actually, I'm exaggerating a lot, of course, but in fact, if you want, Dutch roll is each end of the plane draws a circle, this one draws a circle, and so on. So we have circles. And actually, it's extremely serious. You know, a U-dumper failure on most planes means landing immediately. It's really serious because it can escalate quickly. We're going to talk about things that escalate today. So what happens is the flight augmentation computer, let's forget about the flight augmentation computer. It's just there to improve flight qualities. So the elevator and aileron computer, what it controls is this elevator part. So it's going to control the pitch channel. So it's going to control the pitch channel. That's what causes the plane to pitch up or down. By the way, the E you see here is the same E you have here. Look at this E here and this E here. There you go. Actually, they should have called it SELC, really. Here, elevator is translated as elevator and elsewhere as E. You can immediately tell we're on a slippery slope. If you do that in a software where you name a variable, the same variable, you give it different names, you end up with problems. So I'm telling you, elevator, it's the same thing. Here, it's LRAN, LRAN, okay? It's A. And here, instead of controlling the LRAN, it's going to control the spoilers. And the C, it's just for computer, it's the same thing. Computer, okay, it's the computers. Those computers, when you look at the boxes, this one is silver, that one is black. It's not the same hardware inside. It's on purpose because honestly, we could have taken this one, put the program from that one in it, and it would have worked just as well. In aviation, especially with ultra-redundant systems, we aim not to use identical processors, motherboards, or components. Exactly. When there's a problem, we don't want redundant systems that fail the same way. I have like 5 computers, then there are 2, then 3. I have 5 computers. In the end, one person messes up, and within 2 seconds, everyone else does too, in the exact same way due to the same problem. So what really happened? What did we discover? What did we find out about JetBlue? Who messed up? So here's what happened. We have the sun. The sun, well, everyone knows about it. It's a planet, well, a star actually, which is very active, and it's not very stable, really. If you look at the sun's flames, it's not a calm, peaceful river, right? The energy that this star emits is very variable. It can increase, it can decrease. That's what we call solar cycles, observed for centuries. There are times when it gets really hot and times when it slows down. It's an unstable flame, and sometimes it bombards us. Sometimes it can send what we call solar storms, and so it sends out a huge amount of energized particles. And especially during solar storms, we have charged particles, so hydrogen particles, hydrogen without the electron around it, so it's positively charged. And then it's going to happen. And when it's sent in large quantities, well, we can get hit hard. It can reach us and even the ground. Actually, when you have this plane, it was flying at flight level 350. What does flight level 350 mean? Atmospheric pressure at sea level is about 1,000 in standard atmosphere. So what do we have? At flight level 350, we have roughly 200 and something. You see, from 1,000, we drop to 230, 240, roughly. What does that mean there? What does that mean? It means that in reality, when we're at 350, 80% of the atmosphere is under the plane. It's not above, it's below. So what does that mean is left above you? Only 20% of the atmosphere remains. Does that mean we're flying on a planet that only has 20% of Earth's atmosphere? And that gives us relatively weak protection. By the way, I can make a video for you if you look at the epidemiological studies available on government and academic websites and all that. If you look at what the flight crew is exposed to, it's pretty harsh. In fact, being higher up increases your chances of this problem. Now, here's the problem. Once you have this charged particle that comes in and manages to get through the shielding and all that, then it strikes the silicon. Well, what can it do? There are chain reactions that are going to happen. At that moment, you'll have stray electric currents, and if these currents exceed a certain level, because when you look at a memory, there are several ways to have memories. But roughly speaking, you have a charge that means a 1 and a negative charge that means a 0. Memories can be altered, so we can change them for valid reasons. You have a software that will write a variable into a memory. It has written on the memory. But to write into the memory or change values, you need a certain voltage. So there's a very specific cutoff voltage. If you go above it, you can change the content. Here's the problem. In a powerful cosmic event like the one that happened this year, well, what can happen is that there are enough events for there to be a high enough electric current despite the shielding. And this will change some values. So what's the problem? Is that normally this problem is known. Because the Airbus is from the 80s, it's still a plane from the 80s, even if it's been upgraded and all that. But we're talking about a plane from the 80s. So this issue of solar wind isn't new. It's known and integrated into the code. Except here's what the AD tells us. That's why I'm telling you it's a regression bug. That's what the AD says. That up until software version 103, everything is fine. But for the planes that have version 104, there's a big problem. All right? And that's why we're dealing with a bug, a regression. What is a regression bug? Well, Microsoft, they have them all the time. It means that sometimes there's a bug that appears on Windows and then, well, they fix it. And then 2, 3 years, 4 years later, sometimes even 10 years later, suddenly it comes back, it shows up again. Why? Because we put back, if you will, the piece of code that was causing problems, or maybe we added some new logic and the bug was fixed. Maybe not in a very robust way. That happens all the time. Let me tell you a story. There was a company in 2012 called, I think, Nike Capital, something like that. And imagine that these people had high frequency trading service. And at some point, they put a new version of software in there, this new version of software. Well, I think someone must have uncommented a piece of code, because sometimes when you have guys writing code, well, what can they do? There's a piece of code they don't need. They'll just put it according to the language, and you have your code there according to the language. You have a way to indicate that it's a comment, just a comment. The software ignores it. So guys, what they did is they removed those comment markers. The code became executable. And what he did, believe it or not, is he sent for 45 minutes, 500 billion orders to the market. He caused chaos. It was in 2012. There were stocks whose prices went up, others whose prices went down. All of that was very brutal. And then the day, well, 45 minutes later, when these guys finally started to realize what they were doing, the coffers were empty and ruined. They no longer existed. The accounts, actually, it stopped when the accounts were overdrawn. You see what I mean? So it's all dangerous. Regression bugs are really serious. Now, what's happening is that there's the potential. We agree that up to version 103, as the AD says, up to version 103, the whole story about the solar storm won't be a problem. That means that when a value messes up to version 103, we probably have a routine that will detect it and handle it, cancel or correct the order. Version 104 doesn't have it. So when it happens, bam, disaster. That's it. That's the problem. By the way, solar storms regularly cause power outages. It can even cause widespread interference. But I remember a story. It was in Belgium. Well, actually in Belgium, they were having elections. And at some point, apparently, there was a cosmic event in the voting software. And actually, there was a party that ended up with exactly, look at the number, people who like computers will appreciate it. There was a party that ended up with 4,096 more votes all at once. Actually, that's 2 to the power of 12. So actually, there was a bit flip. That means there was a cosmic event that changed something. In a string of zeros, the 12th zero, snap, it flipped and became a 1, and that was interpreted as 2 to the power of 12, and then it gave that value. Unless the guys, right, cheated, then they blamed it on cosmic forces, the sun, and so on. Do you remember the American elections? It was just a few years ago. It made a bit of a stir, so maybe it was a cosmic problem as well. So as I was saying, the story here is that from 104, there's a problem. So that means from 104, the system can't take this bug into account. So what does it do? Well, it does this. In a plane with electric flight controls, all the commands, all the data that circulate in the form of zeros and ones. So the integrity of these zeros and ones is very important. So what happened in the JetBlue? probably there was a series of zeros going to the depth surface that was interpreted. Imagine that there are zero zeros, which means everything stays dead, there's nothing. And then suddenly a one comes through like that inadvertently and it goes click, okay? Okay? And at that moment, it's extremely serious. Why is it extremely serious? It's extremely serious because it can cause structural problems. And that's what will explain it. Because I'll tell you something. Earlier, I compared Airbus, the Airbus bugs or Microsoft bugs. But I'm not coming as an enemy, you'll see. In fact, all the recording that we see, which has also been known on many planes, for example, on the Airbus, the Boeing 787, the Boeing 787, it was about 10 years ago. It had a bug, and guess what? Be careful. It had a bug where if you left it, if you didn't completely shut down the electronics for 248 days, that can happen because it's a commercial airplane, you know. People are in a hurry, the pilot gets off, they vacuum and all that, and then you get back on without fully rebooting, without completely shutting it down. Guess what happened after 248 days? Everything inside just shut down. So good luck then. A plane with electric flight controls and then suddenly you zero electricity, you know, you find yourself in this thing. It feels like an asteroid, something black like that. Everything shut off. Then it's going down toward the ground. It never actually went down to the ground, okay? But potentially it could have happened. So just to tell you, this kind of crap happens to everyone. So what I'm trying to say now is, why such a harsh reaction? I'm telling you, from the authorities. Because it's this number, look at this number, 10 to the power of 9. I don't know if you can see it. Wow. I feel like I'm making it worse with the lamp. That's 10 to the power of 9. That's extremely serious. Why? Because if you want, in the regulations, in the certification of airplanes, there is an area, what we call catastrophic failures. Catastrophic failures. When I say catastrophic, you have to understand it in the original sense of the word. It means if this failure happens, everyone is dead, the plane is destroyed, there's no more plane, okay? That's what we call a catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failures. By certification, they must happen less than once every billion flight hours. That means they must have a probability of 10 to the minus 9, okay? 1 divided by 1 with 9 zeros after it, 1 in a billion. Okay, so that's by certification. We don't put 0. Ideally, we would like to have 0 because the problem is if you put 0, in engineering, entering 0 spreads it throughout, leading to division by 0. For example, entering 0 here means I'll have a probability of 0. You'll have a mean time between failures. The mean time between failures, that will be infinite. How can you make something with infinite mean time between failures? You'd block everything, no planes, no progress, not even leaving the house. So what we do is we try to get a very low number that we'll use as 0. In aviation, that's 10 to the negative 9 power. In the case we're interested in, this failure falls into that category, the 10 to the power of minus 9 category. Why? Because if we let the plane fly with that software and there's another solar storm while all the Airbuses are flying. Right now, while I'm talking to you, the risk, the Airbus A320, the risk, what is it? 320, 19, 21, actually the whole family. Well, the risk, what is it? It's that we might have this bug happen again. We could have an elevator that suddenly goes all the way to the stop while the plane is flying at high speed. And it can cause disasters structurally. In other words, break the plane. You see what I mean? That's why we're in this range of 10 to the power of 9, minus 9. And that's an area that will justify urgent AAD, that will justify extremely aggressive responses from the authorities. That's why you see all this. It's pretty rare for that to happen. Just to give you a sense of scale, I'll just give you a sense of scale. A billion flight hours is 114,000 years. A billion flight hours is 114,000 years. But no, that means if we say that an error happens, I don't have a brush. If we say that an error happens every time it has that probability, we mean that a plane has to fly, an Airbus has to fly 114,000 years, day and night, for us to see this error occur. I told you I'm not coming as an enemy, so it's extremely rare for an error to happen. Careful. If I stop here and don't tell you what comes next, I would be making a very serious sophism. There are widows and orphans because of this. I'll go a bit further. Look, this is a way of thinking that has ruined the world, that has killed people, all of that. Because statistics, you really have to handle them with a lot of care. Look at this. This is for a plane. How many Airbuses are there today? It's estimated that there are 12,000. Oh, really? Well, okay. So if I take 114,000 and divide by 12,000 Airbuses that are flying, just to see how long it would take for these Airbuses collectively to reach 114,000 years of flight, there, we'll get to 9.5 years. You see what I mean? So yes, if there was only one Airbus in existence, we'd be at 114,000 years. But since there are a bunch of them, right? 12,000, it's more that you need to keep the fleet flying. Careful, once again, you have to keep it flying 24 hours a day for 9.5 years. That's about 8,000 hours a year, though I can't recall the exact number. Roughly, we're talking about 88,000 flight hours. Okay, there are few planes that reach 88,000 flight hours before being retired. I think the McDonnell Douglas 11 from United Parcel Service that crashed recently was around that number, but it's pretty rare. It's not common. Do you understand? Okay, I realize that 9.5 years nonstop isn't very believable. But what I'm trying to draw your attention to is that don't think in terms of 114,000 years. You're looking at around 10, 20, or 30 years is a totally different scale. And that's why I'm telling you, statistics are always very, very dangerous to handle. Because with certain assumptions, you can show some really nice things and all that. But then if you start digging deeper, things get more serious. So basically, that's it. If we're not careful, if we don't change that thing we can see, maybe if I'm being reasonable, taking into account all the planes that take off, you can see a fatal crash, maybe once every 15 or 20 years. That's about what we see in reality, that's it. We're in the 10 to the -9, you know what I mean? It's all code, everything is connected, nothing happens by chance. So what are the operators going to do starting tomorrow? They should update them, so update. They have what they call an MDDU. And previously, on the earlier versions, it was on a floppy disk. I told you it was a plane from the 80s. There was a 3.5-inch floppy disk, considered the best at the time, because before that, there was the floppy disk, the flexible one. 512 was 1 inch. Previously, it was 5.25 inches. Much bigger and flexible. You can still find them on eBay. You can store data on it and nobody will hack you. I guarantee it. There's no need to encrypt anything. You just put them like this. You put them in your bookshelf. We don't have many technicians who could run these actors. Today, most wouldn't even know what they are. So as I was saying, the MDDU now has USB drives. What they're going to do is take a new version of the software that Airbus, I hope, will release. I don't know. Someone will tell us in the comments if the Airbus supports, if the A320 supports downgrading. That means if we can switch to that one, I'm not sure. Just like that. I know that some systems support it. On the other hand, it's not simple. I don't know. Someone will tell us. Either way, we just need to take the USB key. It takes about 2 to 5 hours, depending on the models, MDDU speed and other systems. 2 to 5 hours of downtime for the plane, and from there, it's good, it's ready to fly. So there you go, my friends. To sum up, we're in a computerized plane, and we have a regression bug affecting the hardware, right? Which is going to affect the hardware part, but normally the software is supposed to handle it. That error, they all have error correction systems called error correction code. Don't rely too much on error correction code, as it only supports single error correction code. It can handle one error and sometimes detect two. But if you have a real one, if you get an electrical discharge that comes in and changes a lot of bits, flipping them between 0 and 1, forget about error correction code. It won't see anything at all. It won't correct anything. Okay? So there you go, my friends. That's kind of the idea, right? So let's say the plane is very safe. It's not likely to crash again. If anything, the next time it does, that might be in 20 years. But to make sure that doesn't happen, to prevent it from happening in an even worse way, there's this urgent AD. Because we're in the context, as I told you, in the regulatory framework of a catastrophic failure. And so we have to put ham, eggs, cheese at the slightest suspicion of suspicions of problems. All right, my friends, I'll stop the video here. Thank you for listening. Let me remind you about my book, Escrology, available on Amazon, where I also defend aviation. Thanks to Patreon supporters, this channel wouldn't exist without them. They also offer exclusive videos that aren't tied to current events, making them unique viewing options. And I think there's one coming tomorrow. I was going to make one today. Then finally, I wake up to a friend telling me, look, Airbus is going to get the Nobel Prize for grounding. So I had to work on this one. I'll see you very, very soon. And then all the best.